All right, everyone. Welcome to Agranak Studios. I'm your host, DM Wisdom, and with me today is the wonderful, the mighty, the Hobbit himself, James N. Spahn. How you doing, brother?
Can't complain, man. Walking and talking, brother. Walking and talking.
Nice, nice. Well, the reason for this interview was to talk about your new Kickstarter, or the one that's actually currently going. I guess there's 5 days left on it right now, and we want to talk about that. But before we get into that, there may be some of my viewers that have absolutely no clue who you are in any way, shape, or form. Um, Even though they may have stuff that you've contributed to on their shelves currently. So let the viewers know who you are and what it is that you do.
My name is James M. Spahn. I run a company called Barrel Rider Games, and I am partnered with Gallant Knight Games. If it has a Barrel Rider Games logo on it, uh, almost exclusively I wrote it. I think I hired one person once to write something else, but everything else is all me. I've been running BRG since 2012. BRG tends to focus primarily on OSR products, though we've had a couple of other stuff that's kind of outside that. Wizard Van, Half Jinx, Hero's Journey is kind of on the border there. But
Mhm.
I founded the company with the mentality of fast, fun, and free spirited, and I kind of try to keep to that. Keep it loose, keep it simple, keep it light. Um, I also freelance, and I've freelanced like all over the map. I have freelanced on the One Ring First Edition, the One Ring Second Edition, Adventures in Middle Earth Fifth Edition, Lord of the Rings Fifth Edition, Shadowrun Sixth Edition, Shadowrun Anarchy, Legend of the Five Rings, Adventures in Rokugan, Star Trek Adventures First Edition, Star Wars Force and Destiny, Star Wars Age of Rebellion, Swords and Wizardry, Complete, Dungeon Crawl Classics, Dungeon Crawl Classics Dying Earth, X Crawl Classics, Zorro the role playing game. Most recently, I actually wrote a module for the My Little Pony role playing game.
Yes.
I am all over the map when it comes to freelancing, and that's what I can
Yeah.
remember off the top of my head.
Very nice.
So
Very nice.
it's the running. Well, one of my other freelance buddies says he calls me Thanos because all I do is go around collecting Infinity Stones. And it's not
Very
true, but
cool.
it's not untrue either.
No, that's awesome. So it's like you say, you're all over the map. There's a lot going on in your life, and I'm sure a ton more that is on the horizon. If nothing else, just your tenacity and just want and drive to get out there and write for this awesome hobby that we have, role playing. I mean, how cool is that?
It's the only thing I've ever felt like I was good at my entire life.
Yeah,
Like, well, God didn't make me pretty, funny, or smart, but somehow I know role playing games, so I guess that's where I gotta go. Um,
nice.
so I mean, it's been my dream to do this since I was 8 years. Well, not really 8 years. I've been playing since I was eight. Since I was about 14 or 15 years old, this has been the dream job.
Mhm. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I've got some questions from our Agranak cult patron members, the 13th Circle, and of which you are part of all of that goodness as well. But Coyote asks, where do you find the time and energy to create so much stuff?
I don't sleep. I get 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. Just a fact. Energy, coffee. I drink probably pot of coffee a day on a light day.
Mm-hmm.
And on a busy day, I'll drink 2 pots of coffee. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's true. Um, I have this weird thing where if I'm
Yeah.
not writing, I get angry. Like it frustrates me. There's the frustrations and stress that I deal with, that anybody deals with in life. For me, writing is very cathartic.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that for sure. I've done small bits of writing and produced small little things, nowhere near as prolific as you are. And I mean, but this is your career. This is your bread and butter, right?
This is, as of last year, this is my day job. It was a big leap for
Hmm.
me. One of my children has a disability that requires 24/7 care. And with my second child being a toddler, it was too much for my wife to handle. And so we took the plunge. Like, you've been doing this part time for years and making progress. Let's see if we can do it full time. And
Yeah,
so far, so good. I mean, it might only
yeah,
be mac and cheese on the table, but there's something on the table.
yeah. Right on, man. That's awesome. Um, so speaking of food, Coyote also asks, "What's for second breakfast?"
More coffee.
A second pot of coffee, right? Now,
There's
now, what
literally been
is your?
days. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
There have been days where I've literally made a pot of coffee and poured the cream directly into the pot. It's been like, all right, on town.
Now, what is your go-to coffee? Your brand of choice?
Whatever's cheapest. Great value.
Nice, right on. Okay, moving on. We've got Cup of Solo. He asks, "How different is your approach to writing an RPG to an adventure or module?"
It's pretty different. An RPG is how you do what you do. An adventure is what you do it to, be it the world or the people. So you have to look. They're two halves of a whole thing. A role playing game without an adventure, whether it's or one you conceived of as a DM, is a reading exercise. That's it. And an
Mm,
adventure without the rule set to know how to run it is, again, a reading exercise. So you have to approach them differently, but you have
mm,
to find those joining points and where they'll connect. So it's almost on the opposite ends of things, but it's a bridge, because if you're writing an adventure and it's for a specific game, there are going to be common elements in themes and tone in addition to mechanics. So it can't just
mm.
feel like, we've all read modules for IP based games that don't feel like they belong in that IP. I mean, whatever it might
Right.
be. I'm not going to name names, but we've all in our years read that. It's like, this doesn't feel like an XYZ setting module. And that's, I never want to do that. So even if it's just a straight up, sword and wizardry module, I want it to feel old school. I want it to feel old school
Hmm.
fantasy. So I'm not going to have a assumption that the characters are Tolkien-esque heroic, and you can't use that as a primary driving force, because in old school D&D that
Right.
wasn't necessarily the case. you
Yeah.
know and it's the same thing when you're writing for Star Wars or Shadowrun or Star Trek or whatever. You have to look at, you know does this adventure fit this game, and does this game fit this adventure? So that's
Hmm.
probably the biggest difference.
Very cool. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Um, Wingus Ryu. He's got two questions for you. How long have you been playing RPGs?
I started in 1987. My first role
Okay.
playing, I spent about 6 months reading my brother's first edition player's handbook. I was 8 years old at the time, and I didn't understand what an attack matrix or a saving throw was, but this book had really cool art and really cool
Yeah.
text, and I wanted to
Oh yeah.
figure out what it was. And I could not
Yeah.
wrap my head around it. And then one day I walked into my local comic shop and I saw West End Games first edition Star Wars role playing game on the shelf. Now,
Yes.
I I grew up like watching Star Wars on repeat on Betamax as a kid.
Hmm.
So I knew what a lightsaber was. I knew what a TIE fighter was. And the D6 system was so simple that I just
Yeah.
grokked it immediately. So that was my first role playing game, and I really haven't looked back since. I didn't
Oh,
really
that's
get
awesome.
into D&D until the 1991. You just did a video on this black box coffin set. That was my
Yeah, yeah,
first exposure to D&D outside of playing in a game that someone had run that I got invited to that I barely remember. But
right.
it was 4 years before I went from really Star Wars to D&D.
Okay. That's crazy. Wow. I could see that because when I started playing, I had I was doing first edition, then second edition, and then as soon as I saw Star Wars, and it was the first edition of Star Wars, I picked that up, got the first book, and then I had troubles reading when I was a kid, and reading comprehension was a big deal. My dad saw that I was trying to read and figure out what was going on in these books, and he went out and bought me a stack of role playing books, all the Star Wars stuff for my eighth grade graduation. And yeah,
So
man, we
cool.
devoured years and years and years. I still have those books. So good, so
My
good.
parents were on the opposite
Okay,
spectrum. They were like, "This is weird. I don't understand why you do this."
yeah. um, so number two, I guess you already did that. What was the first TTRPG you played, and how did you get into it? I don't know if you have anything else to add in regards to that.
Really, was always obsessed with Star Wars and from as early as I
Yeah,
can remember. So it was
yeah.
just a natural. The thing I remember most is those full page, full color in universe ads. You know,
Oh, it's so
those were the
rad, so
best.
rad.
I was like, you're in
They were
this
the
world
best.
with
Yeah.
those. So
Mm-hmm.
those to this day still, and the original game still has the greatest template in all of Star Wars D6 history, the Quixotic Jedi, which I will fight and die
Oh
is the greatest template ever.
yeah. Now, did you typically play the Jedi, or were you something else?
I'm the guy who, even when I was a kid, Luke Skywalker is cooler than Han Solo. Superman is cooler than Batman. Samwise is cooler than Aragorn. Like, lawful good is lawful great for me.
Right. Nice. Very nice. Yeah, we got into Galaxy Guide 6. When that came out, I grabbed that. That's about the tramp freighters.
6 was Tramp Freighters. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We devoured that. And so we were basically a bunch of Han Solos with our own little hamburger ships, going across the galaxy and smuggling and being raided by the Imperials and, basically space pirates. And yeah,
It
that
was
was
a
that
Jedi
was a
every
lot of
time.
fun.
It was a Jedi every
Yeah.
time.
Nice.
Actually, as an aside, my first professional rejection letter came from Star Wars. When I was about
Oh,
15 years old, they had a thing for Star Wars in the 90s called the Adventure Journal, which was a quarterly. I wouldn't call it a zine because it was so big, but it was like
right.
250, 220 pages each, and it was
Oh
short
wow.
stories set in Star Wars that weren't about Luke, Han, and Leia, and some articles, but every story and article had game stats. And I
Yeah.
wrote a query letter when I was 15 years old, hoping to write for it because I saw one of the authors was a 14-year-old kid. And I said, well, if he can
Yeah.
do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Sent my letter, got rejected. But the thing is I didn't get a form letter. The guy who wrote me back actually wrote me back and said, we're not, yada, yada,
Wow.
yada. And the guy's name was the editor in chief of the Adventure Journal named Peter Schweifer. And 25 years later, I got to play in a game. Like, we became friends. And
Oh,
I
that's
remember
rad.
he actually sent me Christmas presents one Christmas. Like, and
Oh,
he
that's
didn't
so
remember
cool.
me, but I wanted to tell him, look, dude, the fact that you actually wrote me back, even though I got rejected, I
Yeah.
took as a win.
Yeah. Oh,
Somebody read
totally.
what I had to say.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's rad, man. That's a cool story. Nice story. Um, well, let's shift gears here. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this interview, not only are you awesome and prolific and just doing great things for the community that everyone loves, but you've got the White Box Cyclopedia on Kickstarter right now. So that has to do with obviously the White Box, 1974 White Box, or OD&D. What is the allure for you for that particular system of Dungeons and Dragons? Because I really see it, even though technically you can say, like, I did that video on the red box, I did the coffin box last week, and I'm doing all this stuff. There's people that say the white box was first edition, and then you go from there. Holmes, Moldvay, Red Box, so on and so forth. But then when I look at White Box, there just seems to be a completely different feel to it. So what is it? What is the allure for you?
The allure for me in White Box is like the systems you mentioned, the simplicity, but it's even taken up further. And I think that the simplicity and the allure that comes from it is because at my age and having been doing this for 30 years, been playing these games for 30 years, I trust myself to make a fiat call. And the game actually did a recent update talking about this. And the game trusts me to make a fiat call. So it doesn't feel the
Yeah.
need to have subsystems for everything, which is funny considering that White Box Cyclopedia has so many optional rules. But
Yeah, but
um,
that's the key, right? Is that they're optional. Like you pick
oh,
and choose, grab them.
one of the things I was so critically important to this book was there's a section in the GM section of the chapter of this book that says, "Do not use every rule in this book at the same time; you will go insane." It's a toolkit.
Perfect.
It's a toolkit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and
that's
and
great.
and even and that's what White Box is to me. It is if the encyclopedia is a full open toolkit, White Box is your hammer, your screwdriver, and your wrench. It's the
Hmm.
bare bones, the basics you need to build anything.
Yeah.
Here's your big nails, here's your hammer, here's your wrench, here's your screwdriver. Go build what you want. And
Yeah.
at a certain level of experience, and it sounds arrogant to put it that way, but when you've been doing something long enough, you just get a feel for it, and you
Yeah.
have the confidence of that experience. And that
Right.
to
For
me is the
sure.
big appeal of White Box. Now, I started writing White Box stuff because I picked it up. Matt Finch's third or fourth printing of White Box, the one that was on Lulu forever, with
Hmm.
the snowy cover and the ogres. And I read it and I loved it. And I went looking for supplemental content, and there was like none. There was like one
Yeah.
adventure,
Right.
and that was it.
Yeah.
And I
For
was
sure.
like, this game sucks, or it's an underserved market.
Ah,
And I said,
there you
well,
go.
I have so many ideas of what I can do with this. Let me see if it's an underserved market, and maybe I'll have some success there. And I found writing for it made me feel like I was 10 years old again. Just like, oh, this is what I get this way. And it was
Yeah.
the first system to really do that, to really have that innocent enthusiasm that you have when you're 10 or 11 years old and you got your RC open and you're doing your apps. And I was like, exactly how I feel. You
Yeah.
instantly feel
Oh,
making
that's great. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. 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 Um, Now, getting into the now with White Box Cyclopedia, how did it come to be? What was like the catalyst that kind of threw you into this whole writing process and making this a reality?
it. The book took about 5 years to come together. I'd done so much white box content, and I was going back through it, and I was like, "This is horrible." Not the rules, but the way it was organized or not organized, and the inconsistencies I found between things like white box omnibus, and white box compendium. I was just like, "This is not. I'm better than this. I might not have been 5, 10 years ago, but I sure as heck am now." And originally, the plan was to just take all my optional stuff, all my supplements, put them in one book, and you just had this big book of options. So I started doing that, and I got about 100 pages into doing that, and I said, "This is dumb. I should see if I can incorporate the full rules of the game into the volume." And
Yeah.
now I was I approached Matt Fitch, and because even though it was OGL and technically you could do that, as long as with a couple of caveats you can do that. To me, it was part of a gentleman's agreement. There's an unspoken
Yeah.
gentleman's agreement when it comes to OGL content. A,
Yeah.
you credit the people you take from, and B, on something that is questionable at all, you ask the people. And I went to Matt and I said, "This is what I want to do,"
Yeah.
and Matt gave me his blessing. So at that point, it became a rule set unto itself. And
Nice.
as I began integrating the optional rules and the primary rules, not in a way that where you had to suddenly use the options, but where everything fit together perfectly versus feeling bolted on. I actually made some changes from Swords and Wizardry White Box. One
Hmm.
of the things I did, and this has gotten some controversial, I would say controversial, some people don't agree with it, is I cut descending AC because THAC0 is counterintuitive. And it just is. I'm sorry. So the
Yeah.
game is solely ascending AC. If you want descending AC, you know how to do it. You can do it. Fine, do it. It's not going to change anything.
Right. For
Um,
sure.
and original 74 D&D used only D20s and D6s. It didn't use percentages. It didn't use D8s, D4s. So I went back into the original Swords and Wizardry White Box rules, and anytime I found something that wasn't a D20 or D6, I changed it. So
Oh.
like
Okay.
there's a like binding wounds rule that heals a D4. I turned that into a
Mhm.
D6 -1.
Okay.
If I had a table that was 100, I would usually expand it to 120, and then I had a D6 check die. So you roll a D6 and then roll a D20
Okay.
because I wanted the game to truly be a D20 and D6s. As it,
Hmm.
to me that was part of the seven. A lot of this is meant to evoke that 1974 campaign you back in the day when this was all you had. And then the optional rules is all the crap you and your buddies came up with as the campaign went on. Oh, I want to play a sea elf. Okay, we'll do this. Oh, I want to play
Yeah.
a cavalier. Okay, we'll do this.
Hmm.
And so now all that is that kind of stuff is there.
Very cool. Yeah, I love it. There's so many different ways that you can go, and I love the ascending armor class. It is nice. Right now, my current group we're playing BX, and so we're using old school essentials, which has the ascending already baked in. And I don't have to think about it, even though I can argue that there's a certain esoteric feeling to THAC0 for me, um, because it makes sense for that your AC is in the positive. It's still going down, but it's still in the positive when it's mundane things. But once you get into negative, that's magical, and so there is an understanding, but most people, I would say, 75, 80% of people are like, well, I don't really get it. Then the other 25 are like, well, I totally understand it, but it might be a little bit too cumbersome for anybody else dealing with it. But so I don't know. I depending on the table that I'm at, I'm cool with THAC0. I'm cool with descending, but
So
ascending works too.
I can still calculate a THAC0 in my head. It doesn't mean I should have to. You hit on the head with your
Right.
first description. Esoteric, which literally means understood only by a few.
By a few. Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
to me,
Yeah.
didn't want that. I wanted it to be as easily understood by as many as possible.
Yeah. No, that's great. That is great. Um, let's see. Next question here. What will be included in the main book? So just a brief overview. What
Oh.
do you got in there?
So
I
it's
know there's a lot.
everything from the original Swords and Wizardry. So you've got elf, dwarf, halfling, fighter, cleric, magic user. There's a total of 30 classes. So
Wow.
like, it's not the kind of thing where you're meant to play every class in every campaign. You could pick and choose and say this campaign has these classes because this creates a flavor.
Right.
Um, it's got a dozen new heritages, and they range from things that you feel like have always been there that haven't, like half elves or gnomes, to
Yeah. Okay.
weird like Daganites, because everybody likes a little. So many old school gamers read Conan and Lovecraft right next to each other, so I wanted a nod to
Oh, for sure.
Lovecraft.
Yeah, totally.
Or one of the other things I included was Trollkin, which is a nod to both like half giant, and Trollkin's actually a term from Norse mythology. So I wanted to have a
Yeah.
large kind of hulking, brutish heritage in there. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings guy. So river halflings are in there. Not your hobbity halflings, but halflings who live on the river and are fishermen and things like that. You've
Yeah.
got your shadow elves and your sylvan elves and all this other stuff. And like I said, the idea is that you build from these things. You don't say, all right, you don't hand somebody the book and say, all right, everything in here is open. You say, I'm running this style of campaign. Let me know what you want to play, and we'll see if it fits.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Very
Um,
cool.
then, because that's
Looking
just the
forward to it,
classes and
man.
races. Then
Right,
we
right.
have there's a ton of new spells. Uh, White Box traditionally has cleric and magic user. When I did the druid originally in the omnibus, I had them just use the cleric spell for simplicity's sake, and I got so many remarks over the years of where's a druid spell list? I want a druid spell list. So now there's a
Hmm.
druid spell list. There's rules
Nice.
for arcane spell rules, for being born as a natural caster, familiars, crafting magic items. Uh, there's a system for strongholds, regardless of your class. There's all these different strongholds that are really simple to do. Um,
Yeah.
Psionic abilities. Now they're not like a full psionicist class, because that I'm just no. It's more like
Me
like
too.
like like you might have a psychic ability or two, but you're never going to be like a full on
Yeah.
psionicist
Yeah,
to the core.
I like that idea of like being mind touched and you get one or two or whatever, maybe it's gifted to you by a god or a fey being or something like that, or through an experience. But yeah, full psionicist, I don't know about.
Um, there's seafaring rules, hex crawling rules, ship to ship combat rules. Oh God, new spells, new magic. I said new spells already. New magic items. There are genre hacks, which is probably the thing I'm most proud of in the book. Um,
Nice.
the GM section is more than just advice, and it does have advice in it. One of the sections in the expanded GM chapter, referee chapter, is a section called genre hacks, and there are 4 genre hacks in the book, and they're all meant to mimic famous Appendix N or D&D setting style games. One
Okay.
is called Riddle of Steel. Guess what that mimics?
Yes.
Exactly. And what that does is every genre hack has a list of recommended heritages,
Hmm.
recommended classes, and then
Okay.
kind of overlays you set over the whole campaign. So another one is called City of Thieves, and that
Okay.
is meant to mimic another famous fantasy author who liked to write about a city full of thieves. Um,
Yeah, that's my bane setting. Every time I've started to play Lankmar, it has crashed and burned within months. But I love it so much, man. I love it so much.
what I did was, when I went back and I read the old library stories, a few things I
Yeah,
noticed. First of all, everybody's a thief. So
yeah,
literally, if you're playing the City of Thieves rules, everybody has a thievery skill, regardless of your class. If you're
that's
not certain
great.
classes, it doesn't go up. But
Yeah,
everybody's a thief. I
I
increase the
like
rate
that.
at which I increase the rate at which you heal. Because in
Yeah,
Langmore, so often you'll see them get in a fight, and the next scene they're fine.
yeah.
Um, I introduced carousing, which was by Shadow. Shadow Dark does it so well, and it's
Hmm.
such a staple of Lankmar that I felt that. Uh, that has magical corruption because all the sorcerers in Lankmar are all twisted and corrupted and horrible.
Yep.
And then it
Yep.
has a luck mechanic in it. So that way you overlay that onto your white box campaign, and suddenly you're running a Lankmar style white box campaign.
Oh, that's
And then
great.
I
It's
have
great.
the title. Excuse me. The title for this one was Fairy Stories, and
Uh-huh.
that's not a story about the Fae. That is fairy story in the J.R.R. Tolkien's On Fairy Stories essay style fairy stories. So it is
Okay.
the high good versus evil. We're taking the ring to Mount Doom, or we're trying
Yeah.
to build the dragon lances to defeat the dragons. And it changes the law chaos to a good evil alignment system.
Mm-hmm.
It does things like when you encounter monsters who have a hit die rating too much higher level than the party is inherently has to make saves or they're terrified to represent things like, oh god, that's a dragon, or oh god, that's a Nazgul. There are
Yeah.
things you can do between party members that represent friendship and fellowship and bonds like that are important. And then finally, I did gothic horror because let's be honest, Lord of the Rings is my favorite novel of all time. Dracula is my second favorite novel of all time.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
and I
yeah.
included because the book already has a heritage called Damn Fear and has classes like spiritualist and metaphysician. For anybody who's read
Okay.
Dracula, they know what that means.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure.
so I wanted people to basically be able to do as much or as little gothic horror as they wanted, whether it
Yeah.
is classic, Dracula, Victorian era type stuff, or it's ridiculous Hugh Jackman Van Helsing stuff. I
Yeah.
wanted to include that. So that's got rules for like corruption for evil acts, areas having a dread rating that like physically reduces the light and penalizes your saving throws and makes turning undead
Wow.
really hard, stuff like that. So those are all in the GM section. On top of spell duel, psionics, hex crawling, seafaring, sea combat, 30 classes, 12 races, and every single new and old, every single heritage, new and old, has optional rules in it. So you're not. So when you open up and you look at the fighter, in
Yeah.
White Box, you just get the fighter abilities. Now, when you look at the fighter in White Box Cyclopedia, you'll see a couple of sidebars that say optional rule, and there are things the GM can or cannot include at their whim. So, like one of the optional rules I have for the base fighter is they can teach other people how to use weapons.
Nice.
You can teach you
Very
can
cool.
teach the wizard how to use a sword. He's still going to
Yeah.
suck with
Yeah.
it, but now he can do it
Yeah.
because it's not as game
Right.
breaking when everything is D6 based.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
and
For sure.
and everybody, whether they want to admit it or not, wants to carry a sword like Gandalf if they're a wizard. So
Oh, absolutely.
I've got a very robust chivalry and honor system where anyone can become a knight regardless of class or heritage. And the
Nice.
politics around that and what you have to do to earn that and the rewards you get
Hmm.
for that. And it's not just like you can be the tournament knight, but you can be the twisted Fey knight. You can be like the horrible violent crusader knight. You can be the noble knight. You can be the evil clad in black blackguard knight. You can be the peasant who
Yeah.
rose up to knighthood. That's in
So
there.
cool.
So
So
there's so
cool.
much in there. I literally forget everything that's in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is gold, man. This is so good. It is the. It sounds like the ultimate toolbox for, well, at
I
least
use
guys. Go ahead.
The reason I use the word cyclopedia is because for me, that's what the rules cyclopedia was back in the day. There was a rule for it in the
Hmm.
cyclopedia, you could find it. So I
Yeah,
tried to do that to homage to that, even though
yeah,
that's a 1991 naming
yeah,
term. It still seemed appropriate.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. No, I'm stoked for this, man. This is gonna be
Gee, man,
good.
I can't wait to hold a physical in my hand.
I know, I know, I know. Um, so I saw a recent Kickstarter update because I am a backer, and it talked about Willow Valley. Tell us more about Valley and that kind of setting that you've got going on in there.
Okay, this is hilarious. I was about to borrow your link. Um, so Willow Valley. When I wrote the original White Box supplements that I did back in the day, I wrote three adventures, and I wrote my adventures with the mentality of what had been written in '74, when things like lycanthropes, wizards, and dragons were new and exciting. And to be frank, they should still be exciting. I hate that people, oh,
Absolutely.
it's just a dragon. So
Yeah.
I wrote these three adventures and I put them out. And then when I was putting the omnibus together, I wanted to include the adventures, but at the time they didn't have a connecting thread. The Willow Valley became that connecting thread. All sandbox of like 150 square miles, where
Hmm.
all three adventures took place, and there was slight tweaks made in the omnibus to connect the three of them, as much or as little as you wanted. And over the years, people really glommed on to that, like to the Willow Valley, and it wasn't like it was intentionally generic. Like small village that relies on lumber and a lake next to, you go south
Hmm.
and there's the swamp, and you go north and there's the woods, and past the woods is the great ring of mountains that creates the valley where the fire giants and the red dragon lives. And to me, it felt generic and almost too much so, but
Hmm.
people really, really liked it. And somebody run three campaigns using it. And I was like,
Hmm.
so, you know, and just because it's generic didn't mean I didn't like it. So I decided, okay, if White Box Cyclopedia is successful enough, I want to use it as a product, basically as a relaunch of of a product line. So the White Box Cyclopedia, I already knew I was going to do supplements for it before I ever released it, because I
Yeah.
still had so much more stuff I wanted to write. There's still stuff that like not in there that I'll into this in a second. But the Willow Valley campaign setting is going to be, I'm going to take that 100 square miles, 150 square miles, and I'm going to expand it, and I'm going to include stuff that wasn't previously present, and I might tweak existing stuff that needs to be fixed or that I'm just not satisfied with anymore. Like I looked at it, it's like, man, it really needs like a weird order of knights and a crumbling castle and a beach area. Like there's other classic tropes that I love that I didn't get to include. So
Yeah.
really, it's an excuse
Hmm.
for me to go back in and play with more tropes, and I'm really excited
Oh,
to do
nice.
that.
Very
You know,
cool.
it needs an abbey with a bunch of weird monks in it. It needs this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
and it needs a mega dungeon. It doesn't have a mega dungeon. It's a campaign setting without a mega dungeon. So
Right?
So the plan is the tentative plan, and this is not in stone, could change, but the early plan is to do one big white box book a year, encyclopedia book a year. And the first one would be the Willow Valley. The second one would be a bestiary, that includes a bunch of new monsters, many of which would be the Willow Valley, but applicable to any campaign you want. And then the third would be a mega dungeon set in the Willow Valley. Now, I don't think each of these
Okay.
books would be the 120,000 word behemoth the Cyclopedia is,
Hmm.
but they're certainly going to be large. And in those annual releases, I actually want to, I have done a quarterly zine that I'm calling originally White Box Quarterly. And every issue of White Box Quarterly will have a new heritage, a new class, six new monsters, six new magic items, a short one-shot adventure, and an optional extra stuff, just like grab bag section. So, and I've
Very
got a
cool.
year worth of those already written.
Oh,
So the
wow.
goal is
Wow,
is
man.
basically every year you put a new big white box book out, and then throughout the rest of the year you have this zine that supports it. So
Well, I love that because that seems to be a kind of a critique of some of these guys that come out and they've finally written their own rule set and they've got their game, and then there's nothing that's supporting it on the other end. I've got this book and it's great, but everybody's going, well, where's the adventures? And where are the different supplemental material and campaign settings, etc. And so that's beautiful.
As a creator, that's hard though. When I wrote Hero's Journey Second Edition, I wrote Hero's Journey
Yeah,
Second Edition, and I immediately, at release, I had a player's guide, and then a year later, I had a book that was 6 adventures for Hero's Journey.
yeah, right,
And the sales numbers are diminishing on those kinds of things.
right,
Now, one of the advantages you have with something like White Box is because we got Hodag RPG to do the art, and he captures that 1974 vibe perfectly. Um,
nice.
is when you're trying to mimic, 50-year-old production looks, it's
Yeah,
not as expensive. It's still not as
hmm
cheap as you think, but
right.
it's easier to maintain that. And to be frank, the Cyclopedia Kickstarter has already gone well beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah. So good, so good. Well, how much longer is the Kickstarter going for?
know, it runs until the morning of February 7th. I think
So,
this airs going to be 4 or 5 days.
okay. Well, very good, man. So I'm here to say that if you haven't backed this yet, go down to the link. It's in the dungeon, and go and support this. There is very reasonable tiers. I believe the PDF's like $15. You can get
Mm-hmm.
the physical book, right, is 30, or is that
The
off
30 is for an at cost coupon from drive through
at
because we're not
cost?
doing any in
That's
house
right.
printing. So if you back at the $30 level, you'll still get charged like $10, $12, but that's from drive through. That's not me charging that. That's to cover their
Right.
costs. So really, you're looking at a total of about $40 to $43. But for
Yeah.
a book that has a word,
Amazing.
this describe is the book has the same word count as the Dungeon Crawl Classics core. So that's how much
Wow.
content is crammed in. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot. So yeah, and then there's also the if there's any left at the airing of this, there is the hoity-toity ribbon in the middle, perfect bound
Zone,
or not
ribbon,
perfect bound by
snazzy.
Stitch
Yep.
Brown. Yeah, all the
Yep.
good stuff. There is a highfalutin version of this that you can get, and so if you've got the cash for that, go and back this. It's going to be
Time of this
if you are into old school D&D, old D&D. This is going to be that on steroids, as far as I'm
so
concerned.
the highfalutin version, they all have book plates that are personally physically signed by me. And so you'll have a
Oh,
signed and
awesome!
numbered copy. So it'll be like number
Yeah,
12 of 150 and it'll have my handwritten signature in it and all the good stuff.
very cool, very cool.
An
Well,
actual
is there
actual
anything else
collected
you
book.
would like to add? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think I'm good. I think I'm
All
good.
right, man.
If you're listening to this and you've already backed the Kickstarter, thank you so much. You are literally helping me take care of my family. If you're listening to this and you haven't backed the Kickstarter, I would really like you to. Um, and I think I've made a really good product here and a really good game that people will get years and years and years and years of play out. I've been
Absolutely.
playing the game for 10 years at least, and I'm still obviously very enthusiastic about it. And I think that I am not alone in that. And I hope you'll join me.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you for being here on Agranak Studios today, and I will be seeing you on Discord at least as you lift your head up to see the regular digital world between writing all of this awesome stuff that you're writing.
Literally called the last Kickstarter update looking up from the salt mines because it was like, oh, you haven't done an update in like forever. Let me let people know I'm still alive and what's going on. Like my publishing partner had to poke me and was like, dude, I know you're busy, but like people need to know you're alive.
People need to know what's going on. Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, James. I really appreciate you coming by. And yeah, thank you all for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Later. This video was brought to you by the generous support of our patrons. Consider becoming a patron so you can help us make more content like this. Or get yourself a t-shirt below. Later.
Alright, do this and do that and do this and do that. And watch this video.